Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of IndieFilmopolis, with myself, Mike Baughan, an actor-producer, and with my good friend, writer-director, Philip Pugh. IndieFilmopolis is a new podcast dedicated to indie films, covering the making of our very own low-budget feature, Own Worst Enemy, and also the little indie gems that we love, along with a sprinkling of movie trivia on top. This episode we're going to update you on the current state of Own Worst Enemy, as well as talk about our experiences going through the fun and games of pre-production for Own Worst Enemy. With pre-production as our loose theme for this episode, we're also going to go over our top 10 castings that almost happened but didn't. We're going to discuss our choices for perfect castings and complete miscastings in indie films. We're also going to review Lean on Pete, and then to round things off, we'll have a few recommendations for some of the little indies we've enjoyed most recently. If you're joining us via Indiegogo, hello again, thanks for coming back and sticking around. As ever, we are eternally grateful for your continued support. And if you've stumbled across us by other means, hello to you too. Hello, waving. Thanks for joining us. We hope our insights into the making of a low-budget film and our thoughts on other indie flicks will be informative and entertaining to you. So grab yourself a greasy movie burger and a refreshing beverage, and let's kick things off with an update on Own Worst Enemy. For those who don't yet know, Own Worst Enemy is a low-budget British dark comedy with dramatic and horror overtones and undertones and several tones. It centres around a reclusive man named Andy and the fictitious friends and enemies he creates in order to justify his self-imposed exile. It stars myself as both Andy and his imaginary foe, Mr. P, and it's written and directed by Mr. Philip Pugh. As many of you will be aware, we're in the throes of post-production at the moment. So Phil, how's it all going?
It's going great this month, I think. So as you know, we've got a big 2.5 hour cut of the film.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find ways to make this film shorter.
Yeah.
When I wrote the script, I kind of thought that every scene that I'd put in it for a reason. So I was kind of really worried what I could take out. I was watching this, Trey Parker, Matt Stone. They'd gone and surprised I think it was a writing class, like a university writing class. Yeah. And they were just talking through one of the specific things that they do when they think that they've got a finished script. They've got like a sort of a formula of sorts that they use. Their sort of their formula, their theory, they go through beat by beat, scene by scene.
Yes. And
so what they try and do is every scene, something happens, yeah, and then the following scene needs to be but or therefore, okay, not and then.
So but or therefore, okay,
or therefore.
I like that. So
any kind of and thens, yeah, they get rid of because they don't need it, or they can consolidate the and thens into the previous scene. Yeah. So, and I kind of thought, instinctively had done that anyway, yeah, writing the script for Own Worst Enemy. But then I sort of started going through the scenes. I'm thinking, no, actually, that's a and then scene. I can get rid of that. So that was kind of like a weird. Like I wasn't looking specifically for advice, but that I just happened to stumble across that. And
well, it's good. That's how you know.
Yeah. So that actually I was able to take out 2 or 3 scenes just.
Excellent.
Just by doing that. So, and I also thought that's a really good. I don't know if people listen to this are into writing, but that's a good.
That's a good tip. That's a really good tip. Big up the Trey Parker and Matt Stone.
Yeah.
So, anything more on Own Worst Enemy you can tell us?
Absolutely. So, I invited over literally my harshest critic, my best friend, Nusha Amini, who is Amini.
I've met her. She's lovely. As well as being your friend, obviously it's worth saying she's got experience,
yeah,
with film work as well. Mm-hmm. So
bless her. She watched the whole 2.5 hour film.
Yeah. What did she think?
That's the one you want to get out of the way first.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's brutal. But I think we were just 5 minutes into the film and we were squabbling over one cut, and it got down to 3 frames. And she's like, no,
wow,
she's wrong. But
do you hear that? You're wrong.
But it was great because she hadn't had anything to do with the making of the film. She wasn't even in the country at the time. She read the script 5 years ago, so she had no
preconceptive ideas about it.
Yeah, so instantly she's just, well, that needs to go. That's too long. And
that's what you need.
Absolutely. So I almost wanted to kill myself after she'd seen the whole thing. But anyway.
So everything's going well in the edit. That's what we need. Okay, let's backtrack a little now and talk a bit about the earlier stages of making the film. In this podcast, episode by episode, we're going to go through the whole process of making Own Worst Enemy, from its initial stages right through to its completion. In the last podcast, we talked about the conception of the film. Check out that episode if you haven't already. This time, we're going to focus on the pre-production of the film. So why not start in a good place, like the casting?
The casting, that's probably your favourite bit, is it, Mike? The most important
personal
bit for you.
Only because I got cast, yay! Which was lovely.
When I had the initial idea, it was... I don't think I had anybody in mind, but when I specifically decided to write the idea, I had you in mind.
Ooh, lovely.
For both roles. So obviously, there was no casting hunt for the two main characters.
When you first wrote the script, was it your initial thing straight away to have the main actor play both roles, or was that something you came to as you wrote it?
Specifically because of the lines he says about talking to himself. I'm literally talking to myself, so I literally wanted him talking to himself.
Fair enough. Okay.
I don't remember having any kind of intrepidation giving you the script. I think I would have been surprised if you'd have said no.
I would have been surprised if I'd have said no.
For a long time, it's just me and you working on it.
Yeah.
Just rehearsing the script. Because it's 70% Mike and Mike. Yeah. And then the other 30% is Mike and somebody else. So the first person we cast beyond Mike and sort of outside of our circle of people who we'd normally work with anyway was an Australian actor called Matthew Waters. Anybody who grew up in the 80s and 90s, who, if you're from England or Australia, you almost definitely know at least his most famous role of Bronson Twist in Round the Twist.
Well, it sort of it wasn't afraid to break certain barriers.
It was insane. It's such an insane show. It was a sort of show that I loved growing up, but it was a sort of show that I never thought they'd ever release on DVD. And as soon as I found it on DVD, I bought it without any hesitation. And then rewatching it, I was just like, this is mad, absolutely mad. And then there was shows that I didn't remember watching or hadn't watched, and some of them were just so crazy to the point where I thought, is this actually a kids show? I think Matt's most famous episode, I don't know if you know it, it's the one where
he has special powers in his willy that makes him go like a jet boat across the lake. Mm-hmm. Yes, I've seen snippets of it.
So yeah, it's a completely insane show. And so this is, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah. This is back when people used Twitter.
Used what? I've never heard of that.
Do you remember Twitter? So like whenever I watched a film or that I liked, I would tended to follow the actors and the director. And then rewatching Round the Twist, I was just kind of looking to see who was around on Twitter. And the only person I could find was Matt Waters, and I just gave him a follow. Not long after that, he tweeted me and said, so I think I must have tweeted something about having been catching up with Round the Twist on DVD, and then he tweeted me,
excuse me,
and said something like, "Oh, I hope you're enjoying Round the Twist. I'm in London now. Let me know if there's anything coming up." But that's just kind of like typical actor thing.
Well,
I never,
networking,
So I never kind of thought anything of it. Then a couple of days later, I think did I show you this clip from a short film he made called Stroller?
No, I've not seen this.
It was him and his girlfriend talking in this scene, and she said something to trigger him, and he just went absolutely ballistic and punched her, I think. Started kicking her and then threw this pushchair at the window.
Yeah.
His whole body was just like pulsating with rage. I'd never seen anything like it. And I just thought, oh, that's Perry. And up until that point, because if you know Round the Twist and you know Bronson, you would never look at Bronson and think Perry.
No, he was too cute.
Yeah, he was just like a little rambunctious, cheeky kid. And to be honest, I think he was sort of written as a bit more of a student in the script. And I thought
he was more studenty.
I thought if I change it a bit and make him a bit more chavvy, I think it could work. So anyway, I messaged him over Twitter. I mean, this is like at the time I was like, Twitter's great. Like being able to network with people like that over Twitter's insane. So he said, yeah, send me the script. He said he liked it. he asked me to call his agent, talk to his agent, and
And
that
you
was
went
it.
from there. Wow.
So yeah, cast him by Twitter.
Casting by Twitter. Wow, there's been
It's
better
just
ways to cast.
Yeah, and it's just kind of one of those things that I kind of felt was meant to be, because it was such a weird series of events in a very close succession, like buying the DVD, tweeting about watching Round the Twist, then following him and him seeing the tweet and going, hey, bear me in mind for anything, and then him posting that clip from a short film, which he couldn't possibly have known that would have been of interest to me.
And that brings us nicely, I think, to Terry Dwyer.
Terry Dwyer, yeah. So Terry Dwyer plays the weather woman, the weather presenter. And the great thing about Terry is she's an actress and she's also done presenting work. So I was looking for somebody who did both or had done both.
Because she's been in Hollyoaks.
That's how I knew her, from Hollyoaks, back when Hollyoaks first started. And then she'd presented shows like 60-Minute Makeover, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And I think she's been on done Loose Women and things like that. And so my good friend and producer Nigel Davey approached her agent, and that just she seemed to like the script, and it was just like, yeah, cool, let's do it.
Oh,
and that was just kind of a day. So I think again with Matt, it was a small commitment. It was just a couple of days for Matt, one day for Terry, so it wasn't that they were committing.
They're not committing huge swathes of time, and they were happy to do it. Yeah. And that was a good filming day as well. That was the first filming day.
That was our first filming day, and we filmed.
And on that
Terry,
day as well, we had the other actor come in, Ryan Witchard.
Ryan, yeah.
And he played the other weatherman.
Yes, he did. Again, he was cast through Twitter as well. So
big up to Twitter.
Yes. Again, he was just kind of tweeting me, and he was super funny. I checked out what he was doing, and he was just perfect for this role of the weather presenter. And he came along. He was great, wasn't he? He was.
He was so nice.
And
really nice
he's
guy.
Blown up since. Like I think he's like
huge
some
in
sort
Germany.
Yeah, absolutely. In Germany, I think
he's like the Anton Deck of Germany.
Yeah. So yeah, he's a busy boy.
Which I think brings us nicely on to, I think, was your star turn, or turns, as there's two of them, the Phelps brothers.
So, James and Oliver Phelps, better known as the Weasley twins, is it?
Yeah, they're known as the Weasley twins from the Harry Potter films.
And so I'd met these guys before at charity events. Like they're ambassadors for a local charity called what's his name? Harry Mosley, who did the wristbands.
Yes.
So they were very involved in that, and like I said last time, I do a lot of editing, but sometimes from time to time do corporate events as well. Cover corporate events, and on a couple of occasions I was covering charity events that they were at, and so doing that I'd interviewed them and probably made no impression on them whatsoever, but from that I knew that they were nice, down-to-earth guys. And Nigel Davey, who mentioned previously, we'll talk a bit more, he's friends with their mum, and so I guess the pictures are out there. They play some policemen.
Yeah.
If you're casting a film, I've got a really good tip for you.
Oh, go on.
Okay. We were trying to think of people for these two policeman roles, and in the script they were called Policeman 1 and Policeman 2.
Okay.
And I'd already given one of the roles to Gary Keane, who was from 1 Minute, who you worked with before.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a good actor.
And then we were looking for somebody else, and I think Nigel said, should we try and get someone a bit notable in just for this last day? So I threw a few ideas at him, and these people were literally, they were not in any way famous, just had experience.
Yeah.
Every single person was turning down this other role, and I think it's a pretty good role in terms of the dialogue and stuff. But it did occur to me that when I've done short films before with actors, even just unknown actors, I know that it's from experience, I know it's important to you guys and your CVs not to be known as man on your CV. You'd like to be known as Barry, or just have any kind of name that. So even though for the purpose of the script he doesn't need to be called anything other than man, it just works. But it doesn't look great on a CV or resume. I thought, well, okay, if I change the policeman names, then if I give them actual names instead of Policeman 1 and Policeman 2, and so I named them after a couple of my friends, called them Constable Barrow and Constable Craythorne, after the two Pauls who've helped us.
Which we'll get on to later.
Paul Barrow and Paul Craythorne. And so I had this one role. I thought that one of the Phelps twins had given up acting and gone behind the scenes, and the other one had carried on.
Yeah.
So I said to Nigel, I don't know which one's given up acting, but
whether it was James or Oliver.
Yeah, and he goes, don't worry, I'll sort it out. So a couple of days later, he calls me and says, you're not going to believe it, but James wants to do it. I was like, oh, awesome.
Fantastic.
Like, after we'd had all this trouble, and then just by changing the name in the script to an actual name rather than Policeman Number 1, that being the tip. If you're trying to cast a movie, don't cast Man Number 1. Give them proper names. It doesn't matter for your film. You can call them whatever you want. But for casting, you'll get more engagement with actors if you give them proper names.
Remember that.
So Nigel came back, said James is up for it. It's like awesome. So me and Nigel just thrashed out details, and so Nigel was going back with James's agent. And then it's literally like maybe the next, it could have even been the same day, he calls me up and he goes, you're not going to believe this. I've just spoken to Oliver and he wants to do it. And I was like, okay, well, there's only one role available.
Yeah.
You're going to have to turn him down. And he said, no. I said, I can't,
I
can't do it. I can't turn him down. And I was like, well, we've barely got enough money to afford the one of them, to be honest. And he's like, oh, shit. And I didn't want to dump Gary.
Yeah, because he committed.
And I couldn't see how we could have twin policemen. I thought they'd just be too stupid. I just thought, it's going to be ridiculous. But Nigel was adamant, like, they both want to do it, we've got to have them both. And I was just like, but it's going to be ridiculous why would twin policemen turn up? Doesn't make any sense.
But it worked out because in the end, we did a lot of hairy makeup.
Well,
on the one,
this is what. So I reconciled that. I said, well, okay, as long as they're not brothers and we make one of them look not like the other one. And he goes, okay, let me go back. And he came back to me and he said, they love it. They love that. They don't want to. They want to act together, but they don't like the idea of not being twins. Yeah. I thought, okay, cool. And then God bless them, they agreed to split the fee.
Oh, this is why they're just such superstars.
The best bit for me was a couple of days after we filmed with them, we put some pictures on Facebook and we put them online, and Nigel got them in the paper, these pictures, and our website blew up. Literally. It's getting all this traffic. So where's all this traffic coming from? And it was being redirected from literally dozens of James and Oliver or Weasley twins forums and web pages from all over the world. Like, I knew Harry Potter was big, but I didn't know that individual people would have such a massive following.
Yeah.
Anyway, the best bit was these are dedicated Phelps Twins fans. Yeah. They're discussing on Facebook the pictures that we posted, and they're like, I can see James, where's Oliver?
Oh, that's what you mean.
And they're standing next to each other.
Yeah. So for James and Oliver, that was it.
Yeah, and I was just like, that's perfect. Like, if these dedicated Phelps Twins fans can't tell,
you've made it
perfect.
You've made their day. But it's worth mentioning Gary Keane again, because in the end it still worked out.
Brilliantly, yeah. So what happened was we kept the two policemen and then added a detective
inspector, yeah.
And yes, you're right, it worked out much better having a detective and two sort of lackeys.
Which brings us on to some of the major players for the crew.
Mm-hmm.
We've mentioned him before, Nigel Davey.
Yeah, so Nigel, I know Nigel from when me and Nigel did a collection of short films, which we banded together called 1 Minutes, which I hope we'll get to talk about more in future episodes. But, he was a relatively successful actor. I think if you look up his IMDb page, you'll see he's been in quite a lot of stuff. But he ended up sort of finding a love for producing. And so with this one, he ended up helping me producing. He helped sorting out all kinds of bits and pieces. As much as a producer, like at the end of every day of filming, once everyone had gone, I'd be there with my head in my hands, and he'd come in and counsel me, like talk me off the ledge almost at the end of every day.
He is an excellent producer. In that
he is, yeah.
And then of course you've got your director of photography.
Director of photography, Laura Howard. Yeah. So Laura, she worked for Aardman, didn't she?
She went back and worked for Aardman, I think.
Yes, I think you're right. I think in between Aardman gigs, she did Own West Enemy.
Yeah, and she went and she's done the Shaun the Sheep movie.
That's right. I think she did that afterwards, and she'd just come off Pirates, I think.
Oh yeah.
Was that right?
An Adventure with Pirates, Scientists and Pirates. Yeah.
So before we were crewing up Own West, this was the first time I'd worked with a sort of a proper director of photography.
Yeah.
And I'd read somewhere that the hardest working person on any set will be the director of photography, and that was certainly true of Laura. She never stopped. From the time she turned up to the time that we packed up, she was constantly working.
And she never complained.
No, never.
Oh.
That was great to have somebody that just was just powering through the whole time.
And then you say you got a sound guy who, as far as you're concerned, is like the Steven Spielberg of sound guys.
Like in the Midlands, Neil Hillman is literally the most respected sound recordist and sound mixer for sure. And somehow, by some stroke of luck, we got him as one of our sound recordists / mixers.
Yeah, he'd heard about the film or something from somewhere, hadn't he?
It was through Kevin Paris, who we'll come to.
Yeah.
Sound recording is one of the really underrated things that people leave to the last minute, and I was like, I really need a good sound person. Like, it really makes such a difference.
And I know he committed for a large portion of the film. Unfortunately, was not able to commit for the entirety, but we'll get on to the other sound recordings from that as well.
Yeah.
But he was fantastic. He knew his job so much.
And he's such a nice guy as well, just like a really, really genuine guy. There was no kind of pretense to it. Like, he had every right to be a kind of a stuffy, pretentious sound recordist. But he was on the ball. He was on the ground with us. He was helping us with everything, and the sound recordings that he did are flawless, absolutely flawless. Neil was really busy. He was so busy, and he was so committed to our film that he was doing sound recording for us during the day, and then at night he was sound mixing in his recording studio. This is like a tiny little film, but he just wanted to help us out, and he was that committed that he was kind of putting work aside to do.
I didn't know
in the evenings, and then not just through the evenings, like through the night, and then having a couple of hours sleep, and then coming in and doing full days with us.
It's good to know that people experience that much in doing film can see the potential that this film can produce, and he saw it enough to want to get this film made.
I think so. Like, he did, whenever he wasn't recording, he was sitting there reading the script, which most crew wouldn't normally do. They just, okay, what's the scene? We'll do the scene. But he wanted to know the whole script, and once he'd finished reading the script, he was kind of even more on board. He really could see the potential in it, like you said. But yes, like you mentioned, he's a busy guy, and he couldn't do all the days, but he did most of the first block. And then the very last day of the first block, we needed somebody, and he recommended a guy called Billy Bannister, who's a great guy. And then between Neil and Billy, they did the second chunk between them, I think.
He was committed as well.
He was so committed. Like, he would, he didn't have to stay, like, because we did long days, and he didn't have to stay with us. And the very last day that we did at our main location, we were trying to get everything finished off. We were there till 3 o'clock in the morning, and he was there with us. So that was our sound guys. Honestly, if there's one good thing about this film, is the sound recording is awesome.
Yeah, I sound beautiful.
And we're so lucky to get them. Then other people we had help us out, Sam and Tanya,
makeup artists.
So I guess you had more to do with them than me. So what was your experience working with them?
Oh, they were lovely. They were funny. They were always on board. They were always ready. Whenever we did a cut, they'd come in, they'd have a look, and they'd say, "No, you need to do this on this and this," and they would stop and say, "No, this doesn't look right. Mm-hmm. We need to make him up here. It looks too shiny." Or you would call them in, and they'd be there. They'd be sitting. They'd be ready. Mm-hmm. They'd come in. Their commitment was always there as well. They always wanted to get it right. They always wanted to get it spot on. If they weren't happy, they would say. And their commitment was solid.
And they're always kind of game as well, and that's important because it's such a weird film. It didn't kind of phase them. We did have like other makeup artists who were in and out, and they were great, but I don't think they quite got it. They definitely kept themselves.
They kept themselves, but Sam and Tanya were there on hand. But it was pretty much like a family. All these people were a family. We were all working for the same commitment. We were all committed to get it done. We also had a guy who was committed to the project on the green screen. side of things.
Yeah,
and that was Kevin Powys.
Kevin Powys, who was just awesome. He's a friend of Nigel Davis, and he's done a lot of work with Nigel. And so I knew him by association, and I'd helped him and Nigel do some of his short films. And yes, so like we said, we had these weather reports with Terry Dwyer, and I just thought it'd be simple. We just get a green screen, throw in front of it, camera.
Sounds easy.
Yeah. He's a guy with a lot of stuff, a lot of kit. And when he turned up for the day, he came with a green screen, all the lighting, auto cue.
Wow.
The camera set up, and he was like Laura on that day. He never stopped. He was just constantly working, and he did all that for free. He gave us all that equipment for free. He gave us all his time for free.
Yeah.
So that was great. The first day, just not have to even worry about any of that kind of stuff, and just being able to work with Terry. And then when was it this must have been after we'd done the stuff with the Phelps twins.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
We can't talk too much about this.
No, but it's a scene the time in that's requires a green screen.
Yes, another green screen scene and an effect.
An effect. We'll just say
stunt.
It's a stunt with me, and it involves the green screen.
And again, he helped us out with all of that, and because all the equipment he lent us in his time, I think we gave him an associate producer credit or something.
Yeah,
because at the time we were doing our Indiegogo stuff, and one of the perks was associate producer.
Yeah.
And the equivalent money of what it would have cost me to hire all that kit that he gave us for free far exceeded what someone would have bought an associate producer credit for. So it's like, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah, he's got one, definitely.
Before we started anything,
oh yes, of course,
even before we started our Indiegogo campaign, I'd seen several filmmakers who'd got really great posters to promote their films before the films were even a thing, or before you could even watch the films. Really good, intriguing posters. And I knew of Sean Strong's work. He'd done loads of stuff for local filmmakers and musicians, but I'd never had a project where, as much as I loved his stuff, where I could have used his skills or whatever.
Yeah, there's a real edge to his posters.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, a lot of people do sort of test scenes and stuff to, like when they're doing Indiegogo campaigns and whatever, and I thought if we did like a really great poster campaign instead, I think that'd probably be more beneficial. And it certainly was, because the posters that we did with Sean, they're like mood boards as much as anything else. Yeah. From those posters, you know exactly what the film is. You get the style, you get the tone of it.
Yeah, everything's there. You get the feeling of what the genre of the film's going to be like. There's no mistake.
A bit quirky, a bit dark, a bit horrific, a bit dramatic.
You look at the poster, you don't need any words, and you know what you're going to go and see.
And so I think the problem that some people have when they're doing film posters, particularly if they're doing film posters for short films, they look nice and artistic and they look intriguing, but they don't have anything really to do with the films. Whereas I think our posters were, like I said, they're kind of pretty much mood boards. And because we did those first, Sean was like the first person we brought on to work with us. It wasn't just like people on Indiegogo we could show. It was like anyone else that came on board. Like, this is the style. We had someone help us buy the costumes, but in the beginning it was me and you going around trying to find this style. And once we'd sort of had that in concrete, and this is style, and we put it on the poster, then every costume for Andy after that fit into that mould. So anyone who's doing a crowdfunding campaign, get a great poster. Get an awesome poster that
use that as your pivot.
Not an intriguing one. Get one that really sums up your film, because that helped no end. And Sean was great. He came back and he did posters with Matt as Perry. He did posters with Terry. He came on that day when we filmed with Terry.
With Ryan.
Yes, Ryan. And James and Oliver. He came when we filmed with them.
He even took some pictures of some of the imaginary characters.
This is true. Yes, even one of the imaginary characters has their own poster.
They have indeed. Oh yeah, they were great. And that brings us nicely on, because you say you came to some of these locations. The locations themselves, and am I right in thinking that Nigel Davey found the main location? Yeah.
So Mike's very loud, and there's a lot of swearing in the script.
I don't know what he's talking about.
So we'd had a couple of offers of people wanting to lend their flats, I think even at one point, you and Amanda, your wife, then fiancée, had offered to use your place.
That's right, yes.
But because I knew that we were going to have long days, I knew it was going to be loud and sweary. Like, it really needed to be away
from the general public. Yes, I get the idea.
Well, it's my fault because I wrote the script. I could have wrote something a bit more quieter and family friendly.
My Little Ponies.
So it wasn't just the location, the look of the location that was important. It was also, it needed to be kind of isolated. And so, yes, Nigel Davey found this great location in the Lickey Hills in Birmingham, or just outside of Birmingham. And it was good for some reasons, and it was bad for other reasons. Essentially, what it was like a...
It was an old office block. It basically was...
it was a house. No, it was a coach house converted into an office block with still some of the furnishings of a house in there.
Yeah, but also
there was a
some of the
fireplace,
furnishings.
And there was a kitchen, and there was a bathroom with a bath.
Yeah, even a loft.
Yes, there was a loft. It had everything we needed, and it had much more space than what you see in the film, which was ideal for wardrobe, makeup, people just hanging out, food. But we had this great communal area, so it was great for that respect. It was great that it was in the middle of nowhere, so we weren't bothering anybody. Okay. The disadvantages to it, it was fucking miles away from everybody. It wasn't close to anybody. It wasn't close to you, it wasn't close to me, it wasn't close to Laura. So it was a bit of a haul every day getting there and back.
If I remember, there was still office equipment that was in our way in this one room, and we actually lifted and put it back out into this little back garden area to get it out of the way.
That's true. I don't know if we want to go into... Essentially, it was a call centre at one time, and they hadn't been paying their bills for months and months and months. And then one day, the landlord, he went over to see what was going on and found out that they'd just cleared out and they'd left all the computers and the desks. They'd just taken the hard drives. So there was just rows and rows of desks. It's literally a house with desks in it. And so we were just like lobbing these computers at the back of the room and trying to stack these tables just to clear space. And then, like you said, we were throwing stuff outside. And that was another good bit as well. We had like a little garden. People could just chill outside. It was pretty warm during that time, I think. Yeah,
we had a couple of rainstorms, I remember. We'd mistimed rainstorms. We wanted the rain at certain times and it wasn't there. Mm-hmm. And then there were times where we didn't want it and we had to pause for a bit until it finished.
Another disadvantage was we weren't allowed to film there beyond a certain time, which was a bit annoying. So we tried to keep to that for a little bit. Also, we weren't allowed to stop over.
That was it. Yeah.
It would have been too perfect if we could have stopped over, because there were some days we just could have just gone, okay, we'll just work for another hour and we'll just chill here and bed down and pick up in the morning. But we weren't allowed to do that. I mean, Nigel, as great as he is, he was constantly winding me up the whole shoot. Like, he'd be calling me up and say, "Oh, I've heard from so and so, and this has happened." I'm like, "What?" And they'd go, "No, I'm only joking." I'm like, "For God's sake!" But then, because we weren't allowed to film beyond a certain point, we just got to the point where we just couldn't not carry on filming some days. So we did carry on, and one of the times that we carried on filming, the guy, he had a building next door that he also managed, so he was around up until a certain point during the day. More often than not, he left before we were supposed to leave anyway, so it wasn't too much of an issue. But on this particular day, he was still there at 9:00, and it just so happened that it was one of your loudest, sweariest scenes.
Oh God, I remember this.
And he'd noticed that we were still there, and he came storming over to tell us to get out. And he was about to knock on the door, and all he could hear was you screaming and yelling and swearing. And then he must have gone off, not went to get involved. And then I got a call from Nigel the next day saying, "Oh, the landlord guy's been in touch, and he said, saying you were there and you were having a big argument and swearing at each other and stuff." And I thought he was winding me up, but like for once he was actually being serious at this guy. But he didn't realise that we were filming. He was telling Nigel, "You wouldn't believe the things that they were calling each other."
Okay, so that's a story to remember.
So, and like if we'd have still been there doing like a quiet scene, it would have kicked the door in, I think, and turfed us out. But because you were yelling your head off, he was like scarpered.
So as well as finding these fantastic locations in
Yeah.
Nicky Hills, the ones that we did the green screening at, and the ones for the location, which were stone's throw from each other,
Yes.
we also had to go on a great prop hunting
Which was one
expedition.
of my favourite things. I love gathering props and costumes and stuff. It's one of my favourite things to do when we're doing films and stuff. So
Is it because you think you can like visualise it when you see
yeah,
it?
it really helps. It's no chore for me. I really enjoy doing that kind of thing. So we talked before that during pre-production we were doing a lot of rehearsing of the script and stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that we did was me and you went off round all sorts of charity shops, because if you'd seen any of the clips or any of the photos, you know that Andy's style's very old, and so we couldn't pop down to Pound Stretch or whatever.
Or House of Fraser
yeah,
or anything
not
like
that we had the budget for House of Fraser. We were definitely on a Pound Stretcher budget. So yeah, we're going to charity shops to find all of Andy's costumes and props and stuff, and through doing that, they were just through me and you picking up stuff and talking, we'd come up with little bits of business which ended up in the script. One in particular, the cardigan.
Yeah, that
was looking through clothes, and there was like this perfect cardigan, but it was a woman's cardigan mixed in with the men's stuff. So, oh damn! And so I mentioned that to you, and you said, "Oh well, let's go and have a look through the women's cardigans and see if there's one that would fit me." So we did, and we'll leave it as a surprise in the film. But there's like a little
there's something there.
There's a little thing that we came up with, and it was a good exercise because it helped elaborate on who Andy was. And also we had these little tiny bits of business which we ended up putting back into the script and stuff, which, it just helped develop everything.
Yeah, it emphasised the character a bit more. But then there was other times, more specifically the props, where we'd travel around Birmingham in this great big van.
Yeah,
and you had this incident, this place that... was it an old lady had passed away?
I think she'd gone into care.
She got into care, sorry.
And her neighbours were trying to clear out her flat to give her some money to help her.
That's right, yeah, to give us money.
I was on Gumtree looking for stuff, and I noticed this one person miles through, like, it wasn't really until we started doing this film and started gathering props and stuff and finding locations that I really realised how big Birmingham is. It is
large.
It is huge. So, completely over the other side of Birmingham from where either of us are, there was this, like Mike said, this woman who'd moved out, and her friends were helping her clear the flat, and they'd got these large pieces of furniture. So obviously when we were going around buying little props and costumes and stuff, we could just do that ourselves. But we hired a van for the day to go around and collect as much sort of furniture as we could, old furniture. And I'd found these 3 bits and pieces from this woman's place, and so we went to this block of flats. It turned out that they were literally on the 20th floor or something like that.
It was an advantage in a way because, of course, this old lady had lived with this furniture for as many years as she had done. But, of course, she wouldn't have had the effort or the time or the inclination to want to get this furniture all the way down to buy new stuff to go all the way back up again. So she'd sat with this furniture, which dated back into the 70s and 80s at least.
Way beyond, yeah.
So they were perfect for what we wanted.
And dirt cheap as well. And because they were cleaning out the flat, because they'd only obviously put on these big pieces of furniture, and I was looking around, and I think we were in the kitchen, and I saw these old irons and these old kettles. Yeah. And I said to you, do you think we can we ask them if we can have these things? Yeah. So you sort of broached it and said, can we buy these as well off you? And they were kind of looking at us like, you're taking the piss.
A little bit. But I think they did. They eventually let us buy some of these things.
No, they did. And then I was kind of like, what about that? Can we have that? And they're like, yeah, okay, if you want it. And it got to the point where, like I said, to begin with, they thought we were taking the piss. Yeah. But then when they realised that we were genuine and we wanted the stuff, they were running off into the rooms and coming back with really odd crap stuff and going, what about this? Like they had those 2 statuettes off the fireplace.
Oh yeah.
They came back with them and like, what about these? I was like, they're awful, they're brilliant, I want them, yeah. And then they were kind of like up in the ante between themselves. They were like each running off trying to find the worst thing that they could possibly, and I don't think they could believe their luck because they've got this horrible task of cleaning this woman's poor woman's flat on the 20th floor of this block of flats, and neither of them have transport. And we turn up with a van wanting to take as much off the hands as possible.
We took about 3/4 of the stuff out. I know they had like a big settee or a table that somebody
that
else
settee,
had got.
that horrible settee, and we took a couple of dressers and the table from the window and the chairs, and then we took all the little bits, the kettles, the irons, the meat grinder.
Oh yeah.
Maybe the bread, we did the bread bin and all kinds of stuff. But they couldn't believe their luck.
Yeah, and we couldn't believe ours. It's one of the perfect things. But that's that. That was...
That's most of pre-production, yeah. We haven't mentioned the funding that we did through Indiegogo.
Oh, yes,
but since many of you are via Indiegogo, you already know that story. So we might touch on that another time.
Yeah. On the next podcast, we're going to start talking about the filming. We'll probably split that with the stories that we know about over a couple or quite a few episodes. Mm-hmm. But like we said, we've got rather a loose theme around pre-production for this episode. But more specifically, we're going to focus on casting. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we find most interesting about any movie is the what could have been scenarios around the casting, which is often so critical, and we all know the famous examples. Yeah,
like Tom Selleck. He was literally a moustache hair away from being Indiana Jones.
Yeah, there was Eric Stoltz, who filmed for several weeks as Marty McFly on the Back to the Future before being replaced by Michael J. Fox. They just didn't think he sat into the role, and Michael J. Fox obviously turned it into a career-defining role.
Absolutely. Everyone knows Will Smith as well. He was the producer's choice for The Matrix, but I think the directors didn't want to do the Fresh Prince of the Matrix, so they went with Keanu instead.
But I think he even admitted himself he would have become too much of the screen. He didn't like the film to be the one that talked about it. Mm-hmm. But we ourselves have prepared a top 10 list of maybe more obscure, certainly not as well known in most cases, what could have been castings. We haven't limited ourselves to indie films either, although there are a few of those in the mix. Mm-hmm. So let's kick off with
10.
Frank Sinatra as Dirty Harry. Now, he was the original Dirty Harry for the film. He was cast as it, but unfortunately, he suffered an injury, broke his arm, and wasn't able to continue. I think they were only short way into the filming at the time. And then, of course, they turned to Clint Eastwood.
9.
Robert De Niro. He auditioned. He got as far as doing a screen test, I think, for The Godfather. So he's well known for his Oscar-winning role in The Godfather Part 2.
Yeah.
But he was auditioning, and this is before he kind of made any kind of waves, really. He'd done some films with Brian De Palma.
Yeah.
But, he auditioned for James Caan's role, Sonny. So obviously, if he had got that role in The Godfather, he never would have gone on to do his Oscar-winning performance in Part 2 as the young
Marlon
Brando. Yeah. So how different could that have, all turned out for him?
Can you imagine James Caan doing the younger?
Yeah.
8.
Nicole Kidman as Mrs. Smith in Mr. and Mrs. Smith. She was cast and was doing lots of performing in rehearsals with Brad Pitt, but she pulled out herself because she felt there was no actual chemistry going on between Mr. and Mrs. Smith. So, of course, then after that, it went to Angelina Jolie, of course. Of course, that's where those two met.
Yeah.
7.
This is an interesting one. Robin Williams wanted to be Hagrid in Harry Potter. Like he lobbied for that role. Wow. But the producers and particularly J.K. Rowling had a British-only casting rule. Wow. Also, at another point, Chris Columbus, the director, he'd actually cast an American kid, Liam Aiken, as Harry Potter. I guess he must have done a really convincing English accent. Everyone was happy with him. He got back on a plane thinking he was Harry Potter. When he got off the plane at the other end, he was informed, "I'm sorry, we found out you're American.
You're no longer
Harry Potter." If they had not had that rule, can you imagine how different Harry Potter would have been with Robin Williams as Hagrid? And would we ever have heard of Daniel Radcliffe had he not have...
Well, I get the feeling the Robin Williams thing almost harks back to the Will Smith Matrix thing.
It would have been too much, wouldn't it?
Too much of a thing.
6.
This is the most hilarious one I found. Sean Connery as Gandalf. He was actually presented with it first. He didn't understand the script he didn't understand what Gandalf was actually saying.
Right.
I don't know if this actually refers to when he talks in Elvish
Mm-hmm.
or when he's actually speaking English. But for that reason, Sean Connery turned the role down.
He would have been quite a grumpy Gandalf
Oh
as
yeah,
well,
he'd have
wouldn't
been
he?
very grumpy.
Was it around that time he did The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and he just hated doing that?
He hated doing most films, I think he did. He always seemed like an angry character after
But he was so kind of vile about the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. They're like, you wouldn't want that for Lord of the Rings. It probably could have destroyed the film if there was someone, because everyone, it seemed, who was on board with Lord of the Rings loved the experience, and they really loved the film and kind of got on together, and he wouldn't have fit in that mix. I couldn't have seen how he would have fit in that group.
I do remember, probably at the time, but there's this fantastic story of when the cast was sat in their trailer for certain things, and they would play the Hobbit, playing the Hobbits, Elijah Wood, they would play music, and in this screen just to the side of them was Ian McKellen as Gandalf, and every now and again they would hear, that music now! So that was, the grumpiness was still there.
Yeah, that was gentler Ian McKellen, but certainly Sean Connery would have been kicking that screen door and then kicking the Hobbits out.
Beating the crap out of the Hobbits.
5.
Titanic, Jeremy Sisto. He screen tested with Kate Winslet. It must have been a really late screen test because they were both in costume. They were on the actual set.
Wow. And was that the role that went to?
That went to Leonardo DiCaprio. Yeah. Jeremy Sisto seems to have slipped into a lot of indie roles, and obviously Leonardo DiCaprio. I mean, before that he was Oscar nominated anyway for What's Eating Gilbert Grape, and he'd had a lot of critical acclaim for other films. I'm sure he would have done all right, but I think the massive success of Titanic certainly gave him the opportunity to do what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
If you're in the most successful film of all time, you definitely get the pick of what you want to do, and it's notable that since he's been acting since I think about the early 80s, and he's got 42 credits on his IMDb. But he's only been producing films since the early 2000s, and he's got 30 producing credits. So he's quite a sort of a powerhouse producer now. Cool. And I wonder if he would have been able to take on that responsibility had he not had this massive success with Titanic.
4.
Adam Sandler. For me, I find him extremely frustrating because you can see the potential of him being a good actor, but he just produces awful and stars in awful comedies.
For the most part,
yeah. Which is one of the reasons why he didn't take the role of the Bear Jew in Quentin Tarantino's Inglourious Bastards. And I would have loved to have seen him in that role. He's acted in previous films like Punch Drunk Love, where you can see his potential and see how good he is. But in the end, he turned it down. I think he just shot himself in the foot.
3.
This is one of my favourite what could have been castings because it's just so weird to think of it now. It's Seth Green as Jay in Mallrats. So if you know Kevin Smith's work, you'll know that there's 2 characters that featured in his first 5 films and then reappeared in Clerks 2. That's himself as Silent Bob and his friend Jason Mewes as Jay. And Jay was sort of based on Jason Mewes. He was Jay in Clerks, and then when they did Mallrats, the studio funding it didn't want Jason Mewes involved. They wanted a name. I think they gave Kevin Smith a list of names, and everyone was adamant that it should be Jason Mewes. And the studio did everything possible to try and dissuade him, to the point where they wouldn't pay for Jason Mewes' hotel. He had to sleep in Kevin Smith's room. And they had Seth Green on hold the whole entire shoot to come in at a second's notice. So if Jason Mewes did the slightest thing to fuck up, they would have fired him and brought in Seth Green. That worked out, but yeah, it could have been a very different story. And I don't know how inspired Kevin Smith might have been to bring back those characters if Jason Mewes wasn't playing
exactly.
2.
O.J. Simpson as the Terminator. He was the studio's first choice, and it was Cameron who wanted Schwarzenegger. And thank you God that Cameron got that right.
Yeah.
1.
And then finally, James Woods in Reservoir Dogs.
Which role was he going to go for?
He was offered. Well, Quentin Tarantino sent the offer of the role of Mr. Orange, Tim Roth's role, to James Woods' agent, and allegedly, the story goes that the agent never passed on the script. Reservoir Dogs comes out. It's huge. James Woods meets Quentin Tarantino at some event at some point, and James Woods goes up to him and says, "Hey, I loved Reservoir Dogs. If you consider me for anything else, I'd love to work with you." And Tarantino's kind of like, "What the fuck are you talking about? I offered you one of the roles in Reservoir Dogs." And James Woods was so furious by this, he subsequently fired his agent for not passing on the role.
Wow.
But that's an insane one, because I think Tim Roth was great in that role, and I just can't imagine James Woods and Harvey Keitel playing off each other very well. Harvey Keitel had that kind of
he was the
that fatherly
yeah.
approach. I just couldn't imagine that same dynamic.
No.
That dynamic between Tim Roth and Harvey Keitel. So it is kind of like a father-son role. That just couldn't be replicated with those two. Just wouldn't work.
I could imagine if James Wood played Mr. Pink, the Steve Buscemi role.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But as the copper, no.
So yeah, that's it. That's top 10 of what could have been.
Which brings us neatly onto those films that did get it right, with inspired casting, and those films that got it so wrong. My perfect casting, and it was his debut performance, Vinnie Jones in Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels.
And this time around, have you found the Bollywood remake porno of it? The Cock, Block and Two Smoking Pakoras?
Yeah, I'm not sure what role he played in that. Maybe he sucked on the two smoking barrels, who knows? I've not found it yet. But Vinnie Jones in that role, there was one thing that I remember from it, and that's when he has his violent streak in it, and he gets the guy's head in the car door, and the director turns to him and says, "Just go for it."
Yeah.
And bloody hell, they didn't expect what they got. I mean, the pure rage and hatred that came out of Vinnie doing that.
Yeah. It's an odd cast, I think, because he put in a lot of non-actors, Vinnie Jones being one of them, and I think Vinnie Jones is probably the only non-actor who does it convincingly. Yeah. There's a lot of kind of ex-fighters really struggling to get their lines out, a lot of them. But certainly Vinnie Jones, with no acting experience, he was absolutely perfect. Yeah.
And for you, you're perfect?
Is Samuel L. Jackson in Pulp Fiction. As good as Bruce Willis is, as good as Uma Thurman is, as good as John Travolta is, I could imagine other people in those roles. Particularly with John Travolta, Michael Madsen was supposed to be that role, and I would have loved to have seen that version of Pulp Fiction. But with Samuel L. Jackson, there just isn't anybody who I can think of who could have done that role justice. He was perfect.
Just so brutal. I mean, that first conversation he has with those lads in that flat, and just the way he just spurts off, he shoots the gun and goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, did I just break your concentration?" You can't see anybody else saying it the way he says it, and the joy he has in delivering that speech, and you can't. It's like you say, you can't see anyone else saying it the way he said it. It was almost Shakespearean.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah, it's perfect. So, what about a role that didn't quite live up to, or was completely miscast?
There's a film which is terrible.
Yeah,
it is terrible, which is a shame because some of the points he made in it are really good. Glenn or Glenda, made by Ed Wood, the guy who made Plan 9 from Outer Space. Now, he made this, and it is about transgender issues, but through the entire film you feel like you're being narrated to death. Bela Lugosi, if he had a knife and fork, he'd be chewing the scenery as we spoke. Bless him, very good as Dracula in this. He would be delivering lines as if every single word and syllable meant something. One of the lines that kept getting repeated all the times was slugs and snails and puppy dog tails. I don't know why it kept getting repeated, but several of the characters kept saying it. And right at the end, he would be going, slugs and snails and puppy dogs' tails. Oh my God, get on with it, Bella. Oh, really? I mean, the pauses he would put in. They weren't so much pregnant pauses as the person had had twins and they'd had their own babies. They were that long, some of them. Terrible. The film was bad enough, but he just didn't suit at all. His role was meaningless, and he made it even more so by trying to make it mean something.
Yeah.
And what about yourself? What about your miscast?
My miscast is Gary Oldman in Tiptoes.
Gary Oldman, one of the British actors.
Yeah, well, the actors, one of the greats. In this film, he bizarrely plays the twin brother of Matthew McConaughey.
Well, of course, because they look so alike.
Right. But weirder than that, he is a dwarf.
Well, the special effects department must have had a field day.
Crazy, really. To make matters even more weird, you've got Peter Dinklage in this film playing a character that really you could have easily taken him out. He wouldn't. He has no storyline at all. He's just there.
Yeah.
You just wonder why Dinklage just didn't have that role to begin with. I think you could argue that Gary Oldman was in there for the star power, but this is 2003. You already got McConaughey and Kate Beckinsale in it, who at that time they were like the go-to people for these sorts of movies. So you didn't need another person. So why they cast Gary Oldman in this role? It's baffling to say the least. And obviously, a lot of people found it quite insulting and just weird that they would cast a normal-sized actor as a small character, and have to go to such trouble with special effects to make it look like he was an actual dwarf. So those were some of our perfect castings and some of our miscastings. But we've watched a few films recently. One of them did the festival circuit last year. It got released in America a bit earlier than what it got released here, and that's Lean on Pete, a new film from Andrew Hay, who's a British director, all about a young lad
And
a horse he befriends.
Horse. I liked it because it harked back to a genre of movies that you rarely see these days, and that's the road movie.
Yeah. When it first started, I thought, oh, this is a small town drama kind of thing. And then it changed into a road movie.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed both aspects of it, but I didn't. It spent too long being a small town drama before it became a road movie.
Yeah.
Like some movies work really well, like From Dusk Till Dawn. That's works really well. You've got the road movie part, and then you've got the horror part.
Yeah.
Those two weirdly worked well together. With this film, I was kind of settling in for a small town drama, and then it became a road movie. And I was like, oh, okay, it's this type of movie now. As much as I liked each bit, structurally it didn't work for me.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same par with that. And Lean on Pete was the name of the horse.
Yeah.
And it was almost like this was the inspiration for the lad. And as we're talking about the film, we're going to be giving some things away for those who haven't seen it. So here's a spoiler now. The horse passes away, but he passes away before the end of the film, and that kind of threw me. Mm-hmm. It threw me a lot because I thought this horse and this young lad were doing this journey together, and in almost like the Rain Man sort of essence, one helps the other.
Yeah.
But it didn't work that way, and because Lean on Pete passed away 3/4 of the way in, the last part of the film was a little weird or jarring.
Mm-hmm. One of my few criticisms is the ending. It turns into this series of sort of meetings with different people. So it's like I said, it starts off with this small town drama, and Steve Buscemi is in it, and he's awesome.
He's brilliant.
I loved seeing Steve Buscemi in this kind of role again, because it wasn't until I watched this that I realised how long he'd been out of these sorts of roles. He'd done his TV show, and he'd pretty much been doing voiceover roles in cartoons and whatnot, and then when he turned up in this, I was like, oh my god, I really missed him, because he's just such a presence in the sort of early 90s indie films.
Yeah, like Pulp Fiction,
Reservoir Dogs, all of the Coen Brothers stuff that they did during the 90s. So I loved seeing him in this, and so he was like a major character through that first chunk of the film, and then he's not in it anymore, and then the kid starts meeting these people, and they're in it for a few scenes, and then he meets another person. And then when he got to the end, it didn't feel definitive enough. It didn't feel like he'd found a place that he was looking for. He was still sleeping on a sofa. He was sleeping on his aunt's sofa. He didn't have his own room, didn't have his own bed. It didn't feel like he'd actually got to a place where he was going to be happy. So structurally, that for me, it didn't quite work. But there was so much that I loved about it. Like I said, Buscemi was fantastic. I was disappointed that he wasn't in it more. Chloe Sevigny, who was the jockey, she was great. Loved seeing her.
Everybody in the film played the role perfectly.
What did you think of the main actor, Charlie?
Charlie himself, I felt a little frustrated, but I felt better at the end, because there were times where tragic things happened during the film, especially the death of Lean on Pete.
Mm-hmm.
And it was as if he didn't know how to communicate emotionally, but right at the end he has that moment with his aunts where he actually breaks down. The whole world is... He's almost like he's taken the whole world off his back, and he emotionally crashes into his aunt. And it was nice for me because it seemed like he'd saved him. The film had saved it up for that. This boy was unable to talk, to speak, to save people he wanted to save, and didn't know how to communicate that emotionally until he was sat with his aunt, and that I liked. And,
well, I mean, I guess that's from the fact that he grew up without his mum.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, when the mother figure comes in.
So there were loads of little moments I like. One of the little moments I really liked is when he realizes that he's homeless. It's sort of, and you come to that realization as well with him, because he's sort of run away from home, and he's sort of been sleeping in the van until it breaks down, then sleeping in someone's house. Then he spends a few nights on the street, and someone points out to him that you're homeless. He's like, oh no, I'm not homeless. You do wonder sometimes how people end up being homeless, and that was just a really kind of good example of how someone kind of drifted into not having anything.
Yeah, it was like a slow move into it. There were other bits,
even he didn't realise that he'd made that sort of descent.
There were other bits as well which screamed of the desperation. He desperately wanted to finish this journey to get to his aunt's, and at one point he's robbed of the money that he's earned. And it's a happy moment for him that he's earned this money, and he's robbed of it. And so there's this pent-up desperation to get this money because it's his way out, and he gets a crowbar and he hits the person who robbed him and promptly robs the money back. And there's this surge of violence. It's not overbearing, but there is this surge of violent desperation. And it's even better because then when he runs away, he drops the crowbar, and just as he's finishing running around, he just shouts back, sorry.
Yeah.
I want my money. And then, sorry. It's great because as you're homeless, you develop this trait that you have to do to survive, which he develops just for that moment. But then once he's got the money back, he's back to being the boy, and emotionally... He just screams sorry, and that for me was a nice moment.
One of the things I really liked as well was, and we talked about this last time with how we approached Don't Miss Enemy, in that we've had to do a lot of cutting between the characters. With this film, there's minimal editing. A lot of the scenes are literally one shot, and they're sometimes stationary shots, sometimes they're really well choreographed tracking shots. Very early on there's a scene where he's sitting with his father in the kitchen, and they're just talking, and it's shot through the doorway, and you don't even see the kid's face, you just see the back of his head talking to his dad, but just their literal closeness, physical closeness, just speaks volumes. There's no need to get close up, so the framing devices were enough to get across their relationship.
One of the things I liked about it as well was you were always the audience were always placed as an observer, purely of the boy. So there was a scene where this character breaks into the son's father's house, and the character attacks the father, punches him in the head. But instead of watching the fight and having this massive cutting stage choreograph, the camera turns and focuses on the lad who runs into his bedroom to go and grab a weapon. You hear this crash, you're not sure what it is, but you're stood there just watching the lad, watching the scene. And it seems to this day, the father had hit something and some glass had embedded in him, but we still don't know what it was from or whatever.
And this is all one shot, this is uncut.
And that's how it's treated. There's the scene where he's been caught stealing the food, and the camera is placed in a position as if you're one of the diners in the dining room looking through to the staff room. Again, you're treated as the observer. That's what the camera is. The camera just happens to be catching this scene, but it's focused on the lad the entire time. So there's nice things like that, like it goes stationary and only moves when the kid moves.
One of the things that I was worried about before I watched this film is, I guess I was aware that it was sort of a small town American sort of setting. I know it was a British director. That doesn't always work. Good example this year, even though 3 Billboards, by far my favourite film of this year, one of the, I think a fair criticism is the writer-director Martin McDonagh. You know, clearly doesn't know anything about Ebbing, Missouri. He just picked a kind of a random small American town and decided that that's what these people from Missouri were going to be like. Like I said, I think that's fair criticism with this. And from watching the special features with the film, it's clear that the director, Andrew Hay, really went to town on getting to know what these areas were like, what the people were like, and it feels really authentic.
Yeah, definitely authentic.
I was watching a Woody Allen movie. He'd done one set in England with Ewan McGregor and Colin Farrell.
Oh, yeah.
And that just is like, you don't know anything about England, clearly. He's trying to be Mike Leigh, but it just doesn't work. So yeah, it works both ways. But yes, I was a bit worried that a British director making this small town American film wouldn't work, but he clearly put in the hours to make it work. Let's institute a rating system for our reviews.
Okay. Well,
Instead of stars, let's do Big Kahuna Burgers.
Big Kahuna Burgers.
Yeah.
Okay.
How many Big Kahuna Burgers out of 5?
Well, I think this is quite a lean Kahuna Burger. It's lean because it's good for you.
Mm-hmm.
Kahuna Burger. It's got all the essential ingredients. It's got the burger and the cheese, and it's got the tomato and the lettuce. But structurally, the burger's on the bottom and the cheese has been placed on the tomato and the lettuce instead of on the burger. However, all the ingredients are there.
Yeah.
But structurally, the burger's a bit.
So out of 5.
That's a 4-star burger. It's got all the right stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But they've placed the structure of the burger. Is
Yeah, I'd agree.
4 out of 5 for a burger.
4 out of 5 for me as well. Again, the only issues I have with it are the structural problems.
Yeah, the meat in the burger is
Yeah.
pure
It's
Aberdeen
great.
Angus steak. It's gorgeous. But with the cheese on the lettuce, they've done something wrong there.
Okay, well, this podcast has gone on much longer than we thought. So we're going to rattle through some recommendations.
So, yeah, Phil, you clearly watch a lot of indie films.
Mm-hmm.
You're familiar with a lot. Is there any recommendations you have for us?
Sure, yeah. Recently I saw a film called Breakpoint, not to be confused with Point Break.
No Keanu in this one?
No, it's got the aforementioned Jeremy Sisto.
Ah.
In another world, it could have starred Leonardo DiCaprio. It's on Netflix. You can also get it on Region 1 DVD. It's, if you're after just a very light, humorous film, I'd go for that. It's about 2 brothers trying to win some tennis championships. So yeah, if you have something light, go for that. Last time we talked about the Stanford Prison experiment.
Yeah.
After I posted the podcast, it turned up on Netflix. So if that piqued your interest, you can check it out on Netflix now. It's also available on DVD and Blu-ray. Also, I saw a film called Crystal Fairy and the Magic Cactus from 2013.
Isn't that like a Barbie film or something?
No, believe it or not.
Barbie and the Fairies and the Magic Pirates?
It stars Michael Cera playing completely against type for once. So if you enjoyed his performance, which I did, one of my favourite performances of his was his little cameo at the start of This Is the End. Is it This Is the End? The one
Yeah.
He plays a sort of exaggerated version of himself as a sort of like a coked up Hollywood douchebag.
Yeah.
And he sort of plays a very similar character in this, and there's not much story to it. It's just a very kind of basic road trip through Mexico, then trying to find this cactus with hallucinogenic properties to it, and it's real simple, but I just loved Michael Cera playing a completely different character. That's available on DVD and iTunes. One of my favourite films that I saw recently was called Len & Company from 2015. It's got Reese Ifans, who plays a musician turned producer, and he's trying to get his shit together. And it's a bit of a typical setup, sort of midlife crisis sort of thing.
Yeah.
And he's sort of tried to take himself out of the music industry to find himself, and his solitude is invaded by his son, who's also an aspiring musician, and he just wants his dad to listen to his demo tape. And one of the people he's worked with as a recording artist turns up, and so you've got these 2 people vying for his attention. What I really liked about it is it's the sort of film where it doesn't have a major emotional turning point. There's no big hugging scenes, no big I love you, son, sorry that I've left you all this time. like literally ends with his father acknowledging that he listened to the demo tape. He doesn't even say that he particularly liked it. But that's all the son wanted. He just wanted him to listen to the demo, and he did, and that's how it sort of transpires. And I liked, like I said, that there's no big hugging emotional bullshit, and it's a funny film as well. Last one is called The Wait, which is a really odd film. It stars Chloe Sevigny, who was in Lean on Pete, and Jenna Malone. It's two sisters who's the very beginning, the mother's already died, and Chloe Sevigny gets a phone call informing her that in a few days her mother will be resurrected. So instead of informing any authorities that their mother's died, they wait for the resurrection. That's The Wait, and it plays out really bizarrely. If you're after a slow, weird film, I recommend that's available on Region 1 DVD, as is Lennon Company. So those are a few recommendations if you fancy checking out some indies from the last 5 years. Cinema releases.
We've got a few indies coming out, one of which you may have seen the trailer for already, is the new Spike Lee film Black Klansman, which is the true story about an African American police officer from Colorado who successfully manages to infiltrate the local Ku Klux Klan and becomes head of the local chapter.
Right.
It's produced by Jordan Peele and Jason Blum. Both have scored big last year with Get Out.
Yeah.
And it stars John David Washington, Adam Driver and Topher Grace. It premiered at the Cannes Film Festival this year, and it won the Grand Jury Prize. It's already out in the States and it's due to be released here at the end of the month, August the 24th.
Mm-hmm.
Then we go a bit left field and we go to a foreign language indie film, Polish film called Cold War. This is a love story between two people of different backgrounds and temperaments. They're just completely fatefully mismatched, and it's set against the background of the Cold War in 1950s Poland. Also features Berlin, Yugoslavia and Paris. Cold War also premiered at Cannes this year and won the Best Director award. It's released on the 31st of August here in the UK, but it's not out in the US until the end of the year. Another indie film to look out for is an Australian film called Upgrade. This is an action, horror, sci-fi comedy, which is typically Australian for me, but they're all great. It's set in the near future. Technology controls nearly all aspects of life, but when Gray, a self-identified technophobe, has his world turned upside down, his only hope for revenge is an experimental computer chip implant called STEM. It premiered at this year's South by Southwest, where it won the Audience Award. It's the second film directed by prolific horror writer Lee Whannell, who did the first three Saw films and the first three Insidious films. It's also produced by Jason Blum for Blumhouse and was released in the States in early June. It's due out here in the UK on the 31st of August. This one only had a £5 million budget. Then we come to Britain, where there's a new film by Idris Elba, the famous DJ and actor from the Thor films. His directorial debut is Yardie, which is based in 1980s Hackney, London, about a young Jamaican cocaine smuggler who seeks revenge for the death of his older brother. It premiered at this year's Sundance Film Festival. It's out again at the end of the month on the 31st of August in the UK. At the moment there's no release date for the US. Which leads us to our last film, The Eyes of Orson Welles, which is a documentary film, and it's about the documentarian Mark Cousins, who dives deep into the visual world of the legendary director and actor Orson Welles, the guy who made Citizen Kane. It's to reveal a portrait of Orson Welles as he's never been seen before. Actually, that sounds really interesting. I really fancy watching that. It's another film that debuted at this year's Cannes Film Festival. It's out in the UK on the 17th of August, and at the moment it's still doing festivals in the US. So, next time, Phil, what we'll be doing next time?
Next time, I guess, like we said before, we'll move on to filming stories of Almost Anime.
As this film seems to have taken quite a while.
Absolutely, yes. It's 5 years in the making so far, so we thought I'd make myself feel a little bit better by going through some of the films that have taken years and sometimes decades to complete.
Yeah, I think we're also going to cover our favourite directorial debuts, and we'll par that off against people who made terrible films on their first attempt, but have since gone on to make great films and had great successes as director. We'll also cover reviews of some films, including My Friend Dharma, the short film Faceless Man, and a retrospective look at a classic indie film, Assault on Precinct 13. Please get in touch, send us questions, recommendations for features and shorts, and also crowdfunding campaigns for shorts or features. If you've got a short film or another indie film that you're making, please get in contact with us. We may even back them. The website for the film we're doing is ownworstenemymovie.com. Our Twitter feed is ownworstenemyuk. For those on Instagram, search out Philm Maker, that's PHILM_MAKER, and on Facebook, search out Own Worst Enemy Movie.
Right, that's it, we're done.
Now we're off to enter tonight's dance contest at Jack Rabbit Slims. I'm going to do the shimmy, you can do the shanty. Goodbye!